Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we'll be covering something just a little bit different. Some beginner's tips. Exactly how many? I'm not sure at the moment. I'll tell you by the end. So, first thing, take some time with character creation and just have some fun with it, or do like I'm doing and skip past it entirely. No, the only reason why I'm skipping past this part is because I've done this a bunch of times and I'm really just starting this character to get some early game footage for this specific video. Realistically, you'll be spending a lot of time looking at your character more so than in other games. And you can have armor that hides your character completely. You don't always, and there are options to tweak your armor so you can actually see different aspects of your character. So take some time, customize them, but even more so than your character, customize your palico. Because as a beginner, one thing I won't recommend you do, unless you just want to maximize challenge, will be to leave your palico behind, because that will be an option that you have. Alright, so first tip, not really a tip, just don't worry about this little section here at the beginning. Uh, you can't really screw up. It's giving you some tutorials on things that I guess they couldn't figure out another way to give you a tutorial on. It is pretty cool, but it's mostly to teach you how to aim and shoot with the slinger. You can't really screw it up. You're not going to die here. Just enjoy the moment and have fun with it. Now, first real tip. Don't stress over your weapon choice. There's a bunch of options. Each one plays differently, yes, but there will be plenty of time in the game to actually go back and pick out which one you want and try them out. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But which ones would I actually recommend for a beginner? Sword and shield, dual blades, maybe longsword, and potentially lance and gun lance. Those are the ones that I think lend themselves the best to absolute beginners, with specific focus on sword and shield and lance being, I think, the most beginner friendly weapons. Now, talking about each weapon just a little bit, great sword I don't really particularly like for beginners, for the same reason I don't like hammer for beginners. And it's because you have to actually be pretty good at picking out the timing of the attacks of the monsters to use them effectively. Switch axe, charge blade, and insect glaive are more complex weapons in terms of just the mechanics of how they work. Once you get them down, they're really not that hard to execute on, but the initial mechanics are a bit complicated. So for a beginner, it might be just a bit complex. I don't tend to recommend the ranged weapons to start with just because they feel very samey, at least heavy bowgun and light bowgun do. And bow feels a little bit different, but I don't know. Personally, I recommend melee to start with rather than ranged, because if you've played an FPS before, the ranged weapons will feel pretty similar to what it feels like in an FPS, with a little bit of difference on the bow. And as far as the weapons that I have actually recommended, sword and shield is one of the most beginner friendly weapons in the game that also has enough depth to actually be good in the end game. Lance has good defensive capability and a very simple move set, so it can work well early on in game. Longsword has a relatively simple move set, but does have one or two complex mechanics like building up the gauge. Same with dual blades, they have a gauge to play with, but they're not super difficult. And gun lance, if you watch my tutorial on it, I joke that triangle and circle on the PlayStation is a combo that you can do to just basically win on the gun lance, but it really is a combo that you can do just to win on the gun lance. It's not that bad, and it has a great shield as well. But just to throw this out there, all the blocking capabilities on weapons are roughly equal in this game, so don't even worry about which one blocks the best. Older guides don't really apply to wilds very well. I didn't talk about hunting horn very much, but that's because hunting horn is generally best in groups. It has a bit of sort of support skills and whatnot to it. It's a useful weapon to take out on your own anyway, but it also fits in similar to hammer and greatsword in terms of when you really kind of maximize using it, because you need to know when to play the songs, and that's not always super obvious. So I'm recommending starting with sword and shield. It's a weapon that typically has an easy beginning playstyle, but there's a little bit of complexity to the more advanced combos with it, and you can get to where you can actually dish out some insanely high DPS with it. It has stunning capability with its O attacks, so you can get some stuns in, and you can cut tails and do all the fun stuff. So you can do basically everything that any other weapon can do with this weapon. And early on in the game, don't worry about optimal combos. Right now, what you're watching is me fighting the very first Chotacabra, which he is an easy monster. But other than the initial part of the fight where I started to go in on him like normal, and then I realized that wouldn't really be representative of how simple you can play and still succeed, now I'm just spamming the triangle button. I'm not doing any of the most powerful attacks. I'm not doing any of the really, really potent hits. I'm just dodging around his attacks, hitting triangle. And I even really forgot to use focus mode up until the point where it reminded me here. But focus mode in this game, just so you're aware, you can basically play with it on all the time. And I pretty much do play with it held down most of the time. There's one or two weapons where that's not a good idea. Most of them, it's not going to interfere with you, and all it will really do is let you see when you create a wound, which, talk about wounds when they pop up. But I'm just spamming triangle, and there's a bunch of things the game is suggesting that I do right now that I'm just not even worrying about. I'm trying to show you that early on, you don't have to worry about being optimal in your combos. And there, if you tap R1 and hit one of those little red spots with the attack you do after you do R1, that bursts that and does a bunch of damage. But you don't have to worry about being optimal at the very beginning. You can be suboptimal and still smash a bunch of monsters into the ground. Monster Hunter does not start out the game with high difficulty. And you've probably heard, Wilds has a reputation for being a relatively easy monster hunter, and that's true to a degree. I think part of that is just the aging experience of the community as a whole. It is on the easier side, and another part of that is that the combat is a lot smoother. There's tons of opportunities to learn how to optimize everything in this game, so you do not have to worry about starting out being an expert right off the bat. There's hours and hours and hours of tutorials online. Don't really worry about memorizing those. Just come in, play around, get a little bit of experience. The most important thing to figure out in this game is actually how to block and how to dodge. So dodge timing is probably more important in some instances than really knowing when the best time to hit is. Because as long as you stay alive, they give you an extraordinarily generous amount of time to kill monsters. You don't have to worry about running out of time. You will probably not even come close to running out of time until you get to some very end game things. And by that point, you should be super familiar with how this combat works. Now, another tip for combat that you're probably going to see most veterans kind of discourage, but it makes the game quite a bit easier, is use your secret. And what the secret is the bird. When you're fighting, if you press up, the bird, up on the directional buttons. I'm not sure about keyboard and mouse controllers. You'll have to look those up. I always play with a controller. Even when I'm playing the PC version of the game, I plug a controller in and play with it. Years of habit have ingrained me into playing with a controller, so I've never even tried to adapt to mouse and keyboard. Anyway. Tap up on the control pad, the secret will come by and pick you up, and you can just kind of hold in R1 while you do whatever else you need to do. Your whetstone is sort of the default thing that's highlighted. You can tap square and go ahead and sharpen, and it'll auto dodge to a pretty good degree. You can tap the left directional button in most of the fights in this game, and you'll actually be able to access your supplies, so certain amount of items that the game gives you for the quest, which, by the way, grab your supplies in every quest. It's free items. Only a couple of them get taken back by the game. There's a lot of them that you will actually get to keep, and so that's a good way to build up some items that you don't necessarily have to pay for. Right here, what you saw just then was me mount him. Anytime you do a jumping attack, you have a chance to mount. What you're looking for when you mount is when the screen gets kind of blurry, that means they're getting ready to do something that will cost you stamina, and you either have to hold in R2 to not get thrown off, or hop to a different part of the monster, and that will cause the screen to not be blurry anymore, and you're good. Other than that, you just spam your attack buttons. By the way, if you ever get confused about what attack you want to do, take a quick glance up at the upper right corner, and that shows you what your current chain options are for your combos, but it also, when you're mounting, gives you a list of things that you can do, such as hold on, move, or attack, or execute finisher. So you look in that upper right, and that gives you some tips as to what's popping up. Now, let's sort of take a break from everything that we've been chaining together up to this point, because I've been throwing a whole bunch of stuff at you. Realistically, part of the point of this video is to tell you that there's a lot of things that you really don't have to be concerned with at all. Like when I was talking about the weapon stuff, and the fact that my character in this fight is just spamming triangle over and over and over again, occasionally popping a wound, and I did get that mount off, but I'm not really doing anything that maximizes damage other than that. If you take out all the wounds that I popped and the mount that I got, this fight would only take maybe a minute longer at most. People get too caught up in trying to be perfect right off the bat. This game is about making mistakes, learning from those mistakes, and then improving. Like, this had the Souls formula before the Souls games were really... Well, I'm honestly not sure exactly when the Souls game started up, but I would say this one was around first, but I can't say for sure that Demon Souls is on PS2. I'm pretty sure this started on PS2, so I really don't know which one actually came first, but either way, this series has had the Souls formula for a very long time. And that formula is make mistakes and learn from them. Really quick, whenever the creature dies and you start seeing that ending cinematic, if you're on PlayStation, you can tap the center button, and that'll should be in... On other systems, that should end up being the same button that lets you end the quest immediately, and that'll skip their death animation, and you can go straight to carving. And as soon as you finish carving, I would recommend just going ahead and ending quest immediately. In old games, people used to run around and collect items, so like do some extra mining and that sort of stuff. It's not really necessary in Wilds because of the fact that it's so easy to get back into the open map and you can just kind of run around and farm materials when you want to. Or the fact that you can just kind of stay out in the field to a certain point. So you don't necessarily have to run around and collect extra materials in the quest end screen. But do whatever you want to do. If it makes you happy to collect extra stuff, do it. And speaking of collecting items, you should be concerned with just a couple items early on. It can get overwhelming trying to figure out what things to get, but we'll wait till we pull up the crafting menu to really talk about that. For the moment, let's talk about making armor and weapons. So, early game tip. In the early game, in low rank especially, it is completely unnecessary really to upgrade armor. The starting set's actually not a bad set. It comes with Divine Blessing, which is a pretty good, what they call crutch skill. You'll see a lot of people say to get away from it as early as possible, but realistically, who cares what they think? You're talking about people looking at speedrun strats and telling you that those are the way that everyone should have to play. If you like Divine Blessing because it gives you a little bit of wiggle room, use it. Recovery speed, excellent. Stun resistance, my favorite. I hate being stunned. It's an excellent skill. But we just killed Chotacabra. So right now we have enough pieces that we could, in theory, make 3 of the pieces of armor. Now, what would his armor give us? Flexible leathercraft. It would give us speed eating and item prolonger. Will any of those actually help us? Not really. But, and I can't remember offhand, let's see, let's look at it. The defense would be marginally higher, so it might be useful. So we might look at making that set for the game. The biggest question would be, do we like the way it looks? If the answer is yes, go ahead and make it. It's not going to hurt. As far as weapons go, early game, if it has more attack, go ahead and make it. There are a few other considerations, like when you're looking at the weapon comparisons, you're going to see sharpness, you're going to see affinity, slots, that type of stuff. Realistically, early game, that doesn't matter. If you think a weapon looks cool, you have the materials, go ahead and make it. If you think the weapon looks better, if it has better attack, make it and equip it. Realistically, your attack is going to be way more important. The only time I would say to really focus on things like sharpness levels would be if you make a new weapon, even if it has higher attack, and you go and you find your sharpening like 5 times as much, you may want to go back to one that has a little bit higher sharpness value. And the sharpness value is the little colored wheel on the sharpness thing. Green is good. Really don't worry too much about the sharpness gauge details early on. The general rule of thumb of higher attack is better will carry you through low rank really, really easily. And typically, if you like the look of something, go ahead and be making it, because the way the armor appearance system works in the end game, you have to have the final version of that weapon in order to actually change the look to that weapon. So if you like the way it looks now, go ahead and start making it, because then when you get to end game, you'll be able to mod your stuff over to make it look like that particular weapon. So there's no reason not to make things that you enjoy. More or less, ignore the people that tell you to not even worry about making any low rank armor unless you're just wanting to get to end game as fast as possible. The reality is, the more stuff you actually do, the more value you get out of the game. This game is all about collecting as many armor and weapons as possible. People on the forums back in the day used to joke about how this is basically a heavy testosterone version of Barbie. We're playing dress up. So make whatever you want. If you like the look of it, make it. If it's a different weapon entirely, make it and try it. Now, the area that I have just came into is probably the most important area for early game. And this is the training area. This is really where you're going to want to make your final selection for what weapon you want to play with in the rest of the game. Why? Because every time you change a weapon, it's going to show you on screen 3 relatively common combos that you can test out and see how they go. And those combos will generally carry you through an entire fight. If you learn how to master those combos, you will be solid enough with the basics that you'll be good for other fights in the game. Another cool thing about this training area, you can actually go over to this guy right here, and once you've talked to him once, and then you have to talk to him again, because that's the way most of these little things work where there's an exclamation point, you can actually go in and change the settings for everything as far as the training area goes. And this means you can actually make the monster start to do attacks at you. So you'll see me go in and actually highlight some of these settings for a second. I'm going to change the training dummy to go to smash mode so that it's actually doing an attack. And then you can actually change the pattern and do a bunch of other things to it, like change the direction as to which way you want it to be hitting from, whether it's to the sides or whatever, or whether you want it to track you in general. And you can change like exactly how strong the training dummy is. But then you can go up to the training dummy and you can do things like practicing dodging or practicing blocking. See, hit me, knock me down. Now I've got my stuff out, and right there, managed to dodge through it. Comes down again, block. So you can actually work on the timing for when your blocks, when your dodges, and all that sort of stuff work out. But more importantly, you can get a realistic feel for how all of these weapons actually work. And you can really see in action, without getting your ass beaten by a monster, whether or not you like that weapon. And there's no big long drawn out thing to do. And if you look through your armory, what you'll see is you have every single one of the basic weapons. You will have a basic weapon for every category of weapon. And just to demonstrate what I meant before whenever I was talking about bow guns, this is what your bow guns look like. And I'll give you one really quick tip with them. Look at the cursor in the middle of the screen. What you'll see is right now I'm getting 17 damage per hit unless I'm hitting a wound, and it gets 21. But then it'll drop down to 1. Notice the color of the cursor's changed. What I'm doing is weaving in and out of critical distance. There's a critical distance up close and a critical distance far away, and, oh, okay. There's a bad point really close and a bad point really far away, and then that critical distance is the sort of sweet spot in between. And that is what the challenge is with your ranged weapons, and you have it for all 3 ranged weapons. They all have a preferred distance from the target, and you have to be sure that you're there, and the big indicator for that is going to be your indicator in the middle. Now, you normally hold L1 to be able to pull up the radio menu and do all this other stuff and like swap between your items. You can also swap between different ammo types when you have a ranged weapon when you hold in L1. Just so you know, the radial menu can be customized completely. The general way that I have it set up is to flick and it'll automatically select something. There's a bunch of good guides out there for how to customize things like your radial menu and whatnot. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on those particular things because people like Rurikon have given just in-depth guides on that before, but just showing you a little bit about ranged weapons. So let's jump forward and actually talk about crafting and what sort of materials you should really be paying attention to in early game. So, if you go into your start menu, crafting is one of the first things that pops up. Realistically, all you need to be worrying about is making mega potions in the early game. So you need honey. Towards the end of the game, you will slowly unlock all the different components of what it calls the item trading system, which is this game's version of a farm. You'll be able to farm up a whole bunch of different things. But early game, honey is really the thing that you want because you can use it to make mega potions, you can use it to make catalyst, and then catalyst you can use to make things like demon drug and mega demon drug, as well as armor skin and mega armor skin, and a bunch of other things. Catalysts are just super important for a whole bunch of different stuff. But the truth is, you really don't have to do any crafting at all for low rank. This is the type of system that you can be playing with as you level up and get better at it late game. Another thing you want to watch out for is flash bugs. Grab all of them that you see because flash pods will be super useful against flying monsters later in the game. Pretty much all of them, if they're flying in the air, you can shoot a flash pod in the ground at your feet as long as they're facing you, and it will knock them out of the air and put them back to where they can hit you. And then dung is something else that you'll want because you can use large dung pods to disperse big groups of monsters and luring pods to make sure whichever one you're wanting to target focuses you. You can also use regular dung pods to do that to where you individually hit monsters, but the large one will just sort of hit all of them if there's a bunch of them together. Although, it's also kind of fun sometimes to just fight the one that you want in the middle of the crowd. I like doing that. The last thing that you'll really want to be able to fight or to craft at some point are the traps and your trank bombs. Realistically, making shock traps is a little bit easier because getting the spider webs to make the nets, to make the pitfall traps is just a little bit more of a pain in the butt. It's not that difficult, but there are a couple of monsters that don't really work well with shock traps, a couple that don't work well with pitfall traps. You just kind of have to learn that as you go through the game. And trank bombs, super necessary to capture, but there's only a couple times where you have to capture, and generally if the game tells you to capture and the supplies, it'll actually provide you with the materials to do so. Alright, so let's jump over and look at inside the tent for a second. One thing I like to point out really quickly is that with the item menu, if you tap L3, it'll actually bring up your item loadouts. And these are where you can save different combinations of items that you have so that whenever you pull up your stuff, you can just select that loadout and it will automatically refill your bags with all the items as long as you have them there. Now, granted, that's not really going to be a big deal for you until you get again towards end game where it's a little bit easier to farm up materials and you can craft stuff really easily. So don't get too bogged down in that early game. Just be sure to come by and refill your potions and whatnot. So if you open up the item menu and then you hit triangle, it'll just automatically refill everything you have. The only time you may need to manually do something will be if you've just completely run out of something before the previous quest was over. And personally, I like to always carry around antidotes because I find myself getting poisoned all the time. But other than that, one thing to remember is the game hides some menus from you early on until you've actually unlocked the ability to use those things. Like later on, as soon as you unlock the ability to cook food, you'll have an option to do that in your tent, and it will be somewhere towards the middle of the menu. I can't exactly remember which two it's in between, but I was scrolling back and forth there to show you that it's not there. Another thing is until the game actually tells you about physically upgrading armor, so in other words, using armor spheres to level it up, it will not let you upgrade your armor. What you do is you go into the crafting menu where you're going to make it. So go over to the smithy, talk to her like you're going to make it. And when you click on the piece to make it, if you have the ability to upgrade, it will let you choose between craft or upgrade if you've already made it. If you haven't made it, the only option will be to craft it. But if you have already crafted it, then it'll give you the option to upgrade. It won't do that until it tells you you can. So if you know something is possible in this game, but the menu is not there, you probably just haven't unlocked it yet. And what I'm doing right here is claiming a bunch of different add-on rewards that I have, and there's some that are free, so you'll want to be sure you talk to this guy at least once to claim whatever free stuff that you're allowed to go out there, because they give away a bunch of item packs during the lifespan of the game. Some of these are things that I got from like pre-ordering and having saved data from previous Monster Hunters on it. But at the very least, those first two you should be able to get right off the bat. And that gives you a little bit of a boost at the early game. A couple free items and whatnot. So the game will throw some stuff at you. Now, just because we're getting long, let's throw one last tip in here. Don't let yourself get lost in all of the overwhelming details of this game. There is a bunch of stuff in this game. Very little of it is actually required to see success. The whole reason why I beat Chotacabra to death using just the triangle button was to show you that you really do not have to play optimally to still win. You will learn how to be optimal as you get used to the game itself. You can let yourself get so caught up in all the details of all these various systems and the fact that the game has a million different tutorial windows that it throws at you, and the fact that basically the entirety of low rank is built to be nothing but an extended tutorial. All that stuff can come together and just be overwhelming. Overwhelming as hell, really. And you can get lost in not actually playing the game. Realistically, other than stopping to make sure you refill your potions here and there, you can just chain quest the main story for low rank and pretty much burn your way straight through without ever stopping to do anything other than maybe occasionally upgrading your weapon, and you'll be fine. And realistically, you could even not upgrade your weapon, and all that's going to happen is the fights will take a little bit longer. When you hit high rank is when things will really start slowing down if you're not actually actively upgrading your gear. But I'll be honest with you, one of the fun things about this game is just going through and hunting stuff down. People get really focused on end game, but, well, I guess this is another tip. End game is not the only game. Monster Hunter is and has always been a game that really appeals to completionists. So while I'm saying don't sort of get distracted by all the various systems, what I mean is don't get distracted to the point where you don't actually play the game. Like going out and foraging between every quest, making everything absolutely optimal is not 100% necessary. It gets necessary when things like the Master Rank expansion and stuff comes out, because those fights can get really intense and really difficult. Like, I'm probably going to have to do some optimization for the Omega Weapon crossover event that's getting ready to release. But maybe not. This is just a basic Monster Hunter. This one ends in high rank, and generally those games aren't as hard as the ones that are Master Rank. So the stories you hear about games like Iceborne or 4U or 3U, they're not quite applicable to this specific game. Number one, like I've mentioned before, the baseline difficulty is a little bit lower. Number two, it's just a relatively straightforward one to actually learn some optimization from. I'm getting ready to show you sort of the difference between the first Chotacabra fight and this one, where I actually do use some more optimal combos. Chatacabra is one of my favorite punching bags, and what I recommend you do is if you really want to compare the weapons, let's get decent to where you feel really comfortable with one killing Chatacabra, and then you can try taking him out on other weapons. What I just did then, by the way, was a sneak attack. Whenever you first come up on the monsters, if you walk up to them without hitting them right off of your secret, there'll be a little O prompt. You can do that and you can get a really big hit right off the bat on every single monster in the game. There's only a couple of them that will notice you and actually get aggressive before you get to them. Most of them will let you walk right up to them and run circles around them, and until you attack them, they really won't do much to you. But just relax, have fun with it, kill monsters, collect materials, carve stuff off of them. The Chatacabra armor, the reason why I couldn't make the full suit right off the bat is because the head, the chest, and the arms, I think, I'm trying to remember the order that the armor appears in the game. So the first 3 pieces you can craft only require his parts, but the last 2 require parts that don't come from him. And specifically, one of them requires some parts that come from Gaiju, which are like catfish. They're in the water area of this map. And the other one requires parts that come from searching through bone piles. So at this point in the game, this early on, it's not really letting me explore the map all that much. And the game's not going to let you explore the map all that much early on. It puts you on rails for a little bit. And the reason being is it's trying to force you to actually see that you can have fun with the game without being perfect. You can go through and just go quest to quest to quest a lot of the time and be fine. And this is an example of me riding around on my guy and sharpening my stuff up. And you generally don't want to drop down to red like I did just then. It's just trying to kind of prove the point that you can really not play perfectly and still succeed. Just have fun with it. If you find that you feel like you're not hunting the big monsters enough, stop doing the other shit. There is no reason to get lost in farming up materials or really trying to just maximize how much stuff is in your stash. Fight monsters, the more they're open, the more things you can make, and the more you can actually be really selective about what you make. Or hell, if it makes you happy to go through and build every single armor set as they open up, do that. I'll tell you now, one thing that you're really going to want to learn how to do is Google which monster parts come from where. Tip for that I'm not going to pop up on screen is the way you want to do the Google search. Type in Monster Hunter Wilds and then whatever the part name is that you're looking for, and that will take you to a couple websites right off the bat that will actually straight up tell you, oh, it comes from this one. It's the easiest way to do it. Don't just type in the monster part name, because a lot of the part names are the same from game to game. And some of the monsters are the same from game to game, so you can end up being really confused about where these things come from. So type in Monster Hunter Wilds and then whatever part, like Sharpened Fang or whatever. And it will tell you where it comes from, and usually you can find maps that will actually show you where those monsters are on those maps. So if you really want to start farming up equipment early, do that. Once you feel a little bit comfortable with the way the game works, then you can start diving into tutorials from people like Rurikon, where they're going to give you a super in-depth view on how your weapon works and help you figure out what the optimal combos are. And here's one key with those things too. Optimal combos are just that, they're optimal. The way you master a weapon is actually learning how to weave in and out of the best combo. So learning what combo is actually best for what situation. Yeah, you have your high damage combos, and that's what I joke about with the Gunblade, Gunblade. Been thinking of Final Fantasy VIII lately. The Gunlance, spamming triangle and circle does its highest damage combo. But it's not always optimal to do that one over and over again. It's just that's a weapon where it's really easy to get away with spamming that one and not really get punished all that often. Anyway, I'm going to cut it off here because this one's starting to run pretty long. If you guys want to see some more tips, like maybe game or geared more towards mid-game, then let me know. Otherwise, this stuff should carry you all the way up to the point where you're transitioning from low rank to high rank. It's not really a difficult thing to do. The first 3 story chapters are low rank, and then after that, starting with chapter 4-1, you go into high rank. So for low rank, you do not have to be optimal. you can beat almost everything to death, like halfway playing the game. Take that time to get used to it. Relax, enjoy it, get a feel for how these menus work. Really focus in on just one thing. Don't try to build everything. And don't worry at all about crafting and gathering unless you just want to. Like, you can just fight your way through the first couple chapter encounters and you'll be just fine. As long as you remember to grab your supplies from the secret at the beginning of each quest, then you'll build up enough of a stockpile to carry you all the way through low rank. And realistically, for the first good chunk of high rank, you don't have to have all that much stuff built up and stored to be able to make it through. The very first quest against Nyan Kaku is actually a little bit of a spike in difficulty, but it's because it drops you off in a group of a bunch of them. So if you use the tips about using dung pods and luring pods, it makes that one a lot easier. Early game is not that bad. It really doesn't start ramping up in difficulty until you start doing end game and doing some post content. You do really need to upgrade your armor when you're going from low rank to high rank, just as a tip for that point. I'll go ahead and give you a mid game tip there, because you need the boost in defense to kind of counteract the boost in attack that the monsters do. But once you've got a good high rank set, you're good to go. But yeah, don't get lost in the forest for the trees. Just play, fight monsters, and enjoy yourself. Remember, too, I'm not a top tier gamer. I'm not like some sort of elite high-end player. I've just been playing this series for years. I'm nearly 40. My reaction time is dropping down every day. So remember, at the end of the day, if I can beat it, so can you. Have a good night.